Maria's life was not easy, but she had learned how to keep moving even when the weight of the world sat on her shoulders. She was only 28, yet her face sometimes looked older because of the long hours she worked and the constant worries that filled her days. Her little daughter, Emily, was the light of her life. At only 6 years old, Emily had a smile so bright that it could melt away some of Maria's tiredness, but raising her alone was not simple. Every morning started the same. Maria would wake up before the sun rose, in their small apartment that had only 2 rooms. The walls were thin, and sometimes she could hear the noises of neighbors arguing or the television from the next unit. But she didn't mind those sounds. What truly filled her heart was the quiet breathing of Emily, still asleep under a thin blanket. Maria would look at her daughter for a few seconds before beginning her day, whispering a little prayer in her heart that somehow, things would get better. Her job at the local diner was not glamorous. She worked as a waitress, and the shifts were long. Her feet hurt almost every night, and sometimes her hands shook from carrying heavy trays. The pay was barely enough to cover rent, food, and electricity, and every month she had to juggle which bill to pay first. Still, she was thankful she had a job at all, because she knew what it felt like to sit with no money and an empty fridge. Maria did not complain much. She didn't have the luxury to sit and think about how unfair life was. Instead, she moved forward one day at a time. She woke up early, prepared a simple breakfast, sometimes just toast with a little butter for Emily, and coffee for herself, and then hurried to get her daughter ready for school. The school was not far, just a few blocks down the street, but Maria still held Emily's hand tightly each morning. She couldn't afford to lose her focus, not even for a moment. The walk back from school was often filled with Maria's racing thoughts. She thought about tips from the previous night and calculated how much she had left for groceries. She thought about rent and prayed the landlord wouldn't raise it. Sometimes she thought about dreams she used to have, like going to college or traveling, but those dreams felt like they belonged to someone else. Now, her dream was simple: to keep a roof over Emily's head, to put food on the table, and to see her little girl happy. At the diner, life was a different kind of struggle. Maria had to keep a smile on her face no matter how tired she felt. Customers came and went, some kind and polite, others rude and demanding. She had learned how to take both with grace. When someone smiled at her and said thank you, it warmed her heart and gave her strength. But when someone snapped at her or left without leaving a tip, she swallowed her frustration and reminded herself she was working for Emily, not for strangers' approval. Her co-workers were a mix of personalities. A few were friendly and supportive, others were competitive, always trying to get the best tables. Maria tried to stay out of drama. She didn't have time or energy for arguments. All she wanted was to finish her shift, earn her tips, and rush home to her daughter. That was her rhythm, day after day. Evenings were the hardest. After picking Emily up from school, Maria often rushed back to the diner for her night shift. She would leave Emily with coloring books, homework, or sometimes a kind neighbor who agreed to watch her for an hour or two. Maria always carried a sense of guilt in her chest, wishing she could spend more time with Emily. She wanted to read bedtime stories, help with homework, or simply sit together and laugh. But instead, she was out serving coffee and cleaning tables, while Emily waited for her at home. On some nights, Maria returned so late that Emily was already asleep. She would quietly enter their small apartment, put down her worn-out bag, and walk into the bedroom to see her daughter curled up in bed. Maria would gently brush Emily's hair off her forehead and kiss her cheek. Then she would sit for a moment in the dark, listening to the silence, reminding herself that every sacrifice was worth it if it meant Emily would have a better future. Money was always tight. Sometimes Maria had to choose between paying the electricity bill or buying new shoes for Emily. She often picked second-hand clothes for herself, saving every extra dollar for her daughter's needs. She skipped meals more often than she admitted, telling Emily she wasn't hungry just so her daughter could finish the last portion of dinner. Emily was too young to notice the small sacrifices, but Maria knew one day she might understand. Despite the struggles, Maria tried to keep life cheerful for Emily. On weekends, when she didn't have a double shift, they would take walks to the park. Emily loved the swings, and Maria loved hearing her laugh as she went higher and higher. Sometimes, they shared an ice cream cone, and for those few minutes, it felt like they were just like any other mother and daughter, free of worries. Maria's love for her daughter was the fuel that kept her moving. She remembered the day Emily was born, the tiny cry, the little hands, the way her heart had changed forever. From that moment, Maria promised herself she would give everything to this child, no matter how hard it was. And though life was cruel at times, that promise gave her the strength to wake up each day and face whatever came her way. But deep inside, Maria carried a constant fear. She feared losing her job, because without it she wouldn't know how to survive. She feared Emily getting sick, because doctor visits and medicines were expensive. She feared emergencies, because she had no savings. Every time she saw other parents picking up their kids in nice cars or talking about vacations, she felt a sting in her heart. Not because she was jealous, but because she wondered if Emily would one day resent her for not giving her the same life. Yet, in her daughter's eyes, Maria was already a hero. Emily didn't see the tired lines on her mother's face or the worn-out shoes on her feet. She saw a mother who worked hard, who loved her unconditionally, and who always tried her best. That was enough for Emily, and on the hardest days, Maria reminded herself of that. Still, life had a way of testing her strength again and again. Each morning, when Maria tied her apron and stepped into the diner, she carried not only trays of food but also the weight of her responsibilities. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew she couldn't give up. For Emily's sake, she had to keep moving forward. Little did Maria know, the hardest test was yet to come. Maria had always known that life was unpredictable, but nothing prepared her for the morning when everything seemed to fall apart. Winter had settled into the small town, bringing biting winds and frosty mornings. Their apartment was drafty, and despite Maria's efforts to keep it warm with an old heater, the cold always seemed to creep in. That morning, as the alarm clock buzzed softly on the bedside table, Maria reached over with heavy eyes. She had slept little, tossing and turning with thoughts of unpaid bills and the long shift waiting for her at the diner. As she pushed herself up, she noticed Emily's small figure curled under the blanket. Something felt different. Maria leaned closer and touched her daughter's forehead. Her heart sank. Emily was burning with fever. "Sweetheart," Maria whispered gently, brushing the little girl's damp hair off her face, "are you okay?" Emily opened her eyes slowly, her cheeks flushed red. "Mommy, I don't feel good," she whispered, her voice soft and weak. Maria's chest tightened. She knew immediately that Emily was too sick to go to school. The child needed rest, maybe medicine, maybe even a doctor. But as she looked at the clock, reality struck her. In less than an hour, she was supposed to be at the diner. It wasn't just any shift, it was a busy weekday morning, the kind where tips helped her pay for groceries. Missing a shift meant less money, and too many absences could cost her the job altogether. Maria sat on the edge of the bed, her mind spinning. She had no relatives nearby to call. The neighbor who sometimes helped was already busy with her own children. She thought about staying home, but then pictured the rent notice on the kitchen counter. She had already been late once that month. The thought of eviction filled her with dread. Her hands shook slightly as she dressed quickly for work. She wrapped Emily in warm clothes and gave her a cup of water. "I'll bring you with me, sweetheart," she said softly. "You can rest in a corner while Mommy works. I'll keep you close, and no one will know." Emily nodded quietly. She trusted her mother, even though her little body was weak. Maria lifted her small bag, tucked Emily's blanket inside, and held her daughter's hand as they walked through the chilly streets toward the diner. The cold wind stung Maria's face, but the heavier pain came from inside her. Every step felt like a battle between responsibility and desperation. She prayed silently that the manager wouldn't notice, that the customers wouldn't mind, and that Emily would just sleep peacefully in the booth until her shift ended. When they entered the diner, the warm air and smell of coffee filled the room. Maria guided Emily to a booth in the back, helping her lie down with the blanket wrapped tightly around her. She kissed her forehead. "Rest here, my love. I'll be close." Emily nodded weakly, her eyes already closing. With a deep breath, Maria tied on her apron and hurried to start her shift. She carried plates, poured coffee, and greeted customers with the same tired smile she always wore. From time to time, she stole quick glances at her daughter in the booth. Relief washed over her each time she saw Emily still resting. For a while, Maria thought she might get through the day unnoticed. But as the diner filled with customers, her manager, Mr. Barnes, appeared from the kitchen. He was a stern man, always focused on rules and appearances. His sharp eyes scanned the room, and when they landed on Emily lying in the booth, his face darkened. Maria's heart stopped. She quickly hurried to him before he could cause a scene. "Mr. Barnes, I can explain," but he raised his hand, silencing her. "What is this?" he demanded, pointing toward the booth. "You brought a child here." Maria's cheeks burned with shame. The other waitresses and even some customers had turned to look. She lowered her voice, trembling. "Please, sir. My daughter is sick. I had no one to watch her today. I didn't want to miss work. She's just resting quietly. She won't disturb anyone." But Mr. Barnes was unmoved. His expression hardened. "This is a workplace, not a daycare. Customers don't want to see a child lying around. It looks unprofessional. What if something happens? We can't take that risk." Tears pricked at Maria's eyes, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I promise she'll just stay there. Please, I need this job." But the manager shook his head firmly. His voice was cold and final. "You're done here, Maria. Get your things. You're fired." The words echoed in her ears like thunder. Fired. She felt the ground slip beneath her feet. Her hands grew cold, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. She looked at Emily, who had stirred awake, her eyes wide with confusion. Maria rushed to gather her bag, her face burning with humiliation as the eyes of co-workers and strangers followed her every move. She took Emily's hand, held her close, and walked out of the diner without looking back. The cold air outside hit her face, but she barely felt it. Tears streamed down her cheeks as Emily looked up at her. "Mommy, are you in trouble?" the little girl asked softly. Maria knelt down, hugging her tightly. "No, sweetheart," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "We'll be okay. Mommy just doesn't work there anymore." Her heart broke as she said the words. She didn't know how they would pay rent now. She didn't know how to buy medicine for Emily or food for the week. The future felt like a dark cloud pressing down on her, and for the first time in a long while, Maria felt truly defeated. But as she walked home holding her daughter's hand, she also felt a small flicker of determination deep inside her chest. She couldn't give up. Emily needed her. Somehow, some way, she would find a way forward. The world might have taken her job that day, but it hadn't taken her will to fight for her daughter. And without realizing it, losing that job would turn out to be the first step toward a completely new chapter in their lives. The days after Maria lost her job felt like walking through a storm without an umbrella. Every morning, she woke up with the same heavy thought: what would she do now? The rent was due soon, food in the kitchen was running low, and Emily's fever had only just started to ease. Maria did her best to stay strong in front of her daughter, but at night, when Emily was asleep, she often sat by the small window of their apartment, staring at the dark sky, whispering to herself that she couldn't give up. She began looking for work immediately. Each day, after dropping Emily at school, Maria walked around town with a stack of resumes she had printed at the library. She stopped by grocery stores, coffee shops, and small restaurants, asking if they were hiring. Some places told her they had no openings. Others simply shook their heads without even glancing at her resume. A few said they'd call her if something came up, but Maria knew not to place her hopes on those words. The rejection stung, but she kept trying. Each no was a reminder of how much she needed a yes. One chilly afternoon, while walking past a new restaurant that had recently opened on the edge of town, Maria paused. The place looked different from the diner she had worked at. The glass windows were polished, the sign above the door was bright, and the inside looked modern and welcoming. She hesitated for a moment, smoothing the wrinkles in her coat. Part of her wanted to keep walking, her pride was bruised from all the refusals. But something inside urged her to push the door open. The smell of freshly baked bread and warm soup drifted through the air as she stepped inside. The restaurant was quieter than usual, since it was still early in the day. A man in his early 50s, tall with kind but serious eyes, stood near the counter, checking a clipboard. He looked up as Maria approached. "Can I help you?" he asked politely. Maria swallowed her nerves and nodded. "Yes, sir. My name is Maria. I used to work as a waitress. I was wondering if you might be hiring." The man studied her for a moment. There was something about her tone, humble, yet determined, that caught his attention. "We are actually looking for staff," he said slowly. "Do you have experience?" Maria nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I worked at a diner for years. I know how to handle customers, take orders, and manage busy hours." The man introduced himself as Mr. Thompson, the manager of the restaurant. He asked her a few more questions about her schedule, her ability to handle rush hours, and whether she was comfortable working evenings. Maria answered honestly, though she worried her nerves showed. Finally, Mr. Thompson gave her a small smile. "All right, Maria. You seem sincere, and we could use someone with experience. Why don't you come in tomorrow for a trial shift? Let's see how you do." Maria felt a wave of relief wash over her. It wasn't a promise, but it was a chance, a door opening just when she thought all others had closed. She thanked him repeatedly, her heart racing with hope. That night, when she told Emily, the little girl clapped her hands with joy. "See, Mommy? I told you something good would happen," Emily said, her eyes shining. Maria hugged her daughter tightly, silently thanking fate for giving her this opportunity. The next morning, Maria woke earlier than usual. She ironed her old uniform carefully and tied her hair neatly. She wanted to make the best impression possible. As she walked to the restaurant, she whispered to herself, "You can do this." For Emily. "You can do this." The trial shift began, and Maria immediately noticed the difference between this restaurant and the diner she had worked at. The customers here were a mix of families, business people, and students. The atmosphere was calm yet lively. The staff greeted each other with respect, and the kitchen was organized. At first, Maria felt nervous, afraid she might make a mistake. But soon, her natural rhythm returned. She carried trays with ease, remembered orders quickly, and smiled warmly at customers. One family even complimented her for being attentive and kind. Mr. Thompson, who quietly observed her throughout the day, noticed how she handled each task with patience and care. By the end of the shift, Maria was tired but hopeful. As she untied her apron, Mr. Thompson approached her. "You did well today," he said with a nod. "If you'd like, we'd be happy to have you on the team." Tears welled up in Maria's eyes, but she quickly blinked them back, not wanting to appear unprofessional. "Thank you, sir." "Thank you so much," she said with genuine gratitude. Walking home that evening, Maria felt lighter than she had in weeks. The world still carried challenges, but now she had a job again, a chance to provide for her daughter, and maybe even a place where she wouldn't be judged so harshly. What Maria didn't know, however, was that Mr. Thompson had noticed more than just her skills as a waitress. He had seen the quiet determination in her eyes, the way she worked not for herself but for something greater. He had grown up with a mother who had struggled in similar ways, and though Maria didn't know it yet, this shared understanding would change her life in ways she could never imagine. At home, Emily listened eagerly to her mother's stories about the new restaurant. She loved hearing about the friendly staff and the delicious smell of bread baking in the kitchen. But what she loved most was seeing her mother's smile, a real smile, not the forced one Maria often wore when she was hiding her worries. For the first time in a long time, hope flickered brightly in their small apartment. Maria no longer felt like she was standing in the middle of a storm. Instead, it seemed as though the clouds were beginning to part, letting in a little sunlight. And though she didn't realize it yet, this new beginning was about to lead her into a chapter of life filled with kindness, understanding, and the support she had always longed for. Maria settled into her new job little by little. At first, she was nervous every single day, afraid she might make mistakes or disappoint her new manager. But as the weeks went by, she began to notice that this restaurant was not like her old diner. The staff worked as a team, and the customers seemed to enjoy the warm atmosphere. People laughed, clinked glasses, and shared meals in a place that felt welcoming rather than rushed. For Maria, this change was more than just a new workplace, it was a small piece of peace she had not felt in a long time. Mr. Thompson, her new manager, was different from the bosses she had known before. He didn't raise his voice unnecessarily, nor did he criticize harshly. He gave clear instructions, but he also listened. He treated every staff member with respect, whether it was the dishwasher or the head chef. Maria admired that about him, though she still kept her distance, shy to speak too much. One evening, about a month into her new job, Maria faced a situation that made her heart race. Emily came home from school looking pale and weak. Her forehead was warm again. Maria panicked inside. Memories of the day she lost her last job came rushing back. The thought of history repeating itself filled her with dread. She sat on the edge of the bed, gently stroking her daughter's hair. "Sweetheart, are you feeling sick again?" she asked softly. Emily nodded. "I don't want you to go to work, Mommy," she whispered, her voice tired. Maria's chest tightened. She knew she had an evening shift that night, one she couldn't afford to miss. Bills were piling up again, and though the new job paid a little better, every dollar still counted. She closed her eyes, torn between being the mother her daughter needed and being the employee who had to keep her job. Finally, she decided to do something she had always been afraid to do. She would talk to Mr. Thompson honestly. Maria arrived at the restaurant early that evening, her daughter's face still fresh in her mind. As soon as she saw Mr. Thompson, she took a deep breath and walked up to him. "Sir," she began nervously, "I need to ask you something important. My daughter is sick again. I have no one else to look after her. I don't want to miss work, but I also can't leave her alone. I don't know what to do." Her voice shook as she spoke, but she pushed the words out anyway. She expected disappointment. She expected him to frown or remind her of the rules. She even braced herself for the possibility of losing her job again. But Mr. Thompson didn't respond the way she feared. Instead, his expression softened. He set down the papers in his hand and looked directly at her, his voice calm. "Maria," he said gently, "I understand. You're a mother first. No one should have to choose between their job and their child." Maria blinked, surprised by his words. She wasn't used to kindness from a boss. Mr. Thompson continued, "Bring her here if you need to. We have a small break room in the back. It's quiet and warm. She can rest there while you work. We'll make it comfortable for her." For a moment, Maria couldn't speak. Relief flooded her, and tears stung her eyes. She quickly nodded, whispering, "Thank you, sir. I don't know what to say." Mr. Thompson smiled faintly. "You don't have to say anything. Just take care of her, and we'll make this work together." That evening, Maria brought Emily with her. The little girl clutched her mother's hand nervously as they entered the restaurant. Mr. Thompson himself led them to the break room, where he had set up a small corner with a blanket, some pillows, and even a few coloring books he had picked up on his way. Emily's eyes lit up with surprise. "Is this for me?" she asked softly. "Yes," Mr. Thompson said kindly, crouching down to her level. "This is your little corner. You can rest here while your mom works, and if you need anything, just let us know." Maria watched the exchange with her heart full. She had never seen a manager treat her daughter with such care. It was as though, for the first time, someone understood what she was going through. From that day on, Maria's life began to change. She no longer carried the same constant fear of losing her job whenever Emily wasn't well. Instead, she felt supported. She worked harder than ever, determined to show Mr. Thompson that his trust in her was not misplaced. Sometimes, during her shifts, Maria would glance into the break room and see Emily peacefully coloring or napping. The sight gave her strength, reminding her that she was not alone in her struggle anymore. Mr. Thompson noticed Maria's dedication. He saw how she treated every customer with patience, even the difficult ones. He saw how she stayed late to help clean up, never complaining. He admired the way she balanced her responsibilities, despite the weight she carried. One evening, after closing time, Mr. Thompson sat down with Maria while the rest of the staff cleaned up. He spoke quietly, as though sharing something personal. "You know, Maria," he began, "my mother was a single parent too. She worked long hours, and sometimes I had to sit in the back of the store where she worked. I remember how hard she tried, how much she sacrificed for me. Watching you with Emily reminds me of her. I want you to know you're not alone. And as long as you're here, you don't have to hide your struggles. We'll find a way." Maria listened with tears in her eyes. She had carried her burdens silently for so long, believing no one would ever understand. To hear these words from her boss felt like a weight lifting from her shoulders. That night, as she walked home with Emily's small hand in hers, Maria felt something new, a sense of dignity. She no longer felt like just a struggling waitress. She felt seen, valued, and respected. In their little apartment, Emily cuddled close to her mother and whispered, "I like your new job, Mommy. Everyone there is nice. Especially your boss." Maria smiled through her tears, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Yes, sweetheart," she whispered. "Especially him." For the first time in years, Maria felt like life was giving her not just challenges, but also chances. And with Mr. Thompson's understanding, she began to believe that brighter days truly lay ahead. As weeks turned into months, Maria's life slowly began to change in ways she had never thought possible. The fear that once followed her like a shadow started to fade, replaced by something she had almost forgotten how to feel: hope. Every morning, she woke up with a sense of purpose. She no longer dreaded going to work. Instead, she looked forward to stepping into the warm, welcoming restaurant, tying her apron, and greeting both customers and co-workers with a genuine smile. The place had become more than a job for her. It was a safe space, a second home where she was respected for who she was, not judged for her struggles. Emily's life improved too. With the support of Mr. Thompson, she never had to feel alone when her mother worked. She had her little corner in the back room of the restaurant, filled with her blanket, books, and crayons. Sometimes, when Maria had a short break, she would sneak into the room and sit with her daughter for a few minutes, watching her draw or listening to her chatter about school. These moments filled Maria's heart with joy, reminding her of why she worked so hard. Financially, things began to stabilize. Maria was careful with every paycheck. She created a small system for herself: rent first, food second, and then saving whatever little remained. It wasn't much at first, but as the months passed, she managed to set aside a tiny emergency fund. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was standing on the edge of disaster. She had a little cushion to fall back on, and that alone gave her peace of mind. Her co-workers, who had once been strangers, slowly became friends. They admired her work ethic and respected her dedication to her daughter. They often offered her help, whether it was swapping shifts when she needed time with Emily or bringing little gifts for her child. Maria, who had spent so many years feeling isolated, began to realize she wasn't as alone as she thought. But it was Mr. Thompson's kindness that stood out the most. He never made Maria feel like a burden, never made her apologize for being a mother. Instead, he encouraged her, reminded her that she was doing something noble by balancing work and parenthood. Sometimes, after closing, he would share stories from his own life, about his mother's sacrifices and how they shaped him. Those conversations left Maria inspired. She realized that her struggles weren't signs of weakness, they were proof of her strength. As time went by, Maria grew more confident, not just as a worker, but as a woman. She started to believe in herself again. She even allowed herself to dream of small things she had once thought impossible, like taking Emily on a picnic, buying her new shoes without worrying about bills, or one day moving into a slightly bigger apartment. One spring afternoon, the restaurant organized a family day for all the staff. Maria hesitated at first, unsure if she belonged, but Mr. Thompson insisted. "Bring Emily," he said warmly. "You both are part of this family too." So Maria went, holding Emily's hand as they walked into the park where the event was held. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was part of something bigger than her own struggles. Emily ran around happily with the other children, laughing freely, while Maria joined the other employees in games and conversations. The laughter, the sunshine, the feeling of belonging, it was all so new, yet so healing. That evening, as they walked home, Emily looked up at her mother with wide eyes. "Mommy," she said softly, "you're happy now?" Maria paused, her heart swelling. She bent down and kissed her daughter's forehead. "Yes, sweetheart," she whispered. "I am." Months later, Maria's hard work was rewarded when Mr. Thompson called her into his office. She walked in nervously, wondering if she had made a mistake. But instead, he smiled and handed her a letter. It was a promotion. Maria was now a senior server, with a small raise and more responsibilities. Her hands shook as she held the paper. She had never expected recognition, never thought her efforts would lead to something more. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Thank you, sir. Thank you for believing in me." Mr. Thompson shook his head gently. "No, Maria. You earned this. You believed in yourself, even when life made it hard. I just gave you a chance. The rest was all you." That night, when Maria showed Emily the letter, the little girl jumped up and down with excitement. "You did it, Mommy. I'm proud of you," she squealed, wrapping her arms tightly around her mother. Maria laughed and cried at the same time, holding her daughter close. In that moment, she realized something important: her journey wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about growth, about building a future where Emily could thrive, and where she could finally feel secure. The small apartment that once felt cold and hopeless now felt warm with love and possibility. Their lives were far from perfect, but they were filled with something more valuable than money: stability, respect, and hope. Maria knew there would still be challenges ahead. Life was never easy, especially for someone walking the path she had walked. But now, she faced the future with courage, knowing she had people who supported her, a boss who understood her, and a daughter who gave her every reason to keep going. She no longer looked at herself as just a struggling waitress. She was a mother, a provider, a survivor, and now, someone who was building a brighter tomorrow. As she tucked Emily into bed that night, the little girl whispered sleepily, "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be strong like you." Maria smiled through her tears, brushing her daughter's hair gently. "You already are, sweetheart," she said softly. "You already are." And with that, Maria finally allowed herself to close her eyes with peace in her heart, knowing that what once seemed like the end of firing, a humiliation, a moment of despair had turned into the beginning of a new life filled with hope, love, and the promise of better days ahead.